Good morning. Members of the class of 2026, family members, and friends, welcome to the annual hooding ceremony of the University of Chicago Law School. My name is Adam Chilton, and I'm the Dean of the Law School. Now, today on the chancel, I'm joined by many members of the law school's faculty who are present to recognize the class of 2026. In addition, we have law school staff throughout the chapel and back at the law school to help make today possible and also help celebrate today's graduates. Now, I'd like to start by congratulating the class of 2026 on your tremendous accomplishment, graduating from the University of Chicago Law School. Now, graduating from any law school is an achievement worth celebrating, but graduating from this law school is something truly exceptional. I sincerely believe that ours is the most rigorous law school in the world. It's also not easy to get into, which means that everyone who attends our law school had other excellent options. Many of those options presumably had fewer exams, more forgiving grading curves, less demanding professors, and perhaps even a few more days of sunshine. But for some reason, you chose this place. You chose to challenge yourselves when you didn't have to. And because you embraced that challenge, and as of today, you all succeeded, you've earned our respect and our admiration. So today is worth celebrating. But no one reaches today alone. Every graduate sitting before us today was supported by family members, friends, and partners, many of whom are able to join us today here in the chapel, or they're watching back at the law school, or on the live stream from around the world. Those loved ones made sacrifices of their own. Some made financial sacrifices, some provided advice and encouragement, some offered practical help when it was needed, and many simply accepted that for 3 years, they'd see a little bit less of someone that they deeply cared about. And it is a place as demanding as this one, those sacrifices are particularly meaningful. There were evenings when you needed to study rather than socialize, weekends when you were preoccupied with an assignment or preparing for an exam, moments when you were less available than you wish you could be. And for 9 finals periods, you were probably a ball of anxiety and stress. And the people who supported you did so because they care about you, and they want to help you succeed. So on behalf of the law school, I want to thank everyone who supported the class of 2026 for helping them make it to this day. Thank you. Of course, it's not only the family and friends who helped and supported the students who are graduating today. It's also the faculty and staff seated behind me and working today throughout the chapel and at the law school who invested their time and energy in helping you succeed. Part of why they made that investment is, of course, because they care about you. But the truth is, they didn't know you before you arrived at our orientation. What drives them to make an investment in you is a belief that the legal profession matters, and as a result, that legal education matters. The faculty and staff have devoted their careers to helping prepare the next generation of lawyers, judges, scholars, public servants, and leaders. And during your time at our law school, I hope you've come to appreciate just how much they care. One of the distinctive features of this law school is the amount of time that our faculty spend with students outside the classroom. They continue conversations between classes, they invite students into their homes for Greenberg seminars or CLF auction items. They show up for coffee messes, wine messes, Hemingway Society events, and seemingly anywhere where we can get them free food or drinks. In short, they make themselves available in ways that go beyond what their job requires. Now, I can assure you that they do this not because there are any sticks. The faculty here are almost all tenured, which means they cannot be fired for failing to spend extra time with students. Nor is it because of any carrots. We live in an era of perpetual university austerity, and there are certainly no bonus payments for hanging out in the Green Lounge. The reason they do it is much simpler. They care. They believe that taking on this hands-on approach to legal education will make you better, and in turn, it will make our country and our world better too. And as you leave today, I'll hope you will carry with you not only a fond memory of your time here, but also some of the values that our faculty and our staff share that make them go the extra mile for you. Let me mention 4 of those values that I hope that you'll take with you. The first is embracing the life of the mind. This phrase has long been associated both with this law school and with this university, and at its core, it means remaining intellectually curious. It means exposing yourself to new ideas. It means being willing to learn from disciplines beyond your own. And it means evaluating arguments based on the strength of the evidence and the reasoning behind them, rather than who happens to be making them. For 3 years, you've lived in an environment where people care deeply about ideas, where assumptions are challenged, where claims are tested, and where difficult questions are welcomed rather than avoided. I hope you will view that not as merely a 3-year detour on your way to a career. I hope you'll continue to read broadly, learn constantly, and remain open to the possibility that there are still things left to discover. The most successful lawyers, and I think the most fulfilled people, are the ones who never stop learning. The second value is the importance of building community. One of the things that makes this law school special is that it remains a genuinely in-person institution. We learn together, we argue together, and we break bread together. And as you start your careers and your families, you'll have more and more demands on your time. And since you studied at the University of Chicago, you'll understand opportunity costs, decreasing marginal utility, and the importance of efficiency. You'll also be good at convincing others, and you'll be good at convincing yourselves, which means you'll find reasons to think you should just work from home because that's where you're more efficient, that the time commuting isn't worth it, and that the meeting really could have just been an email. But community's hard to build from home. It takes time to be the kind of person that at least some of the time shows up when they don't have to, when it's not easy, and when it's just because you want to help the people around you or support the institutions that you care about. The third is to talk to people with whom you disagree. This institution has long believed that a university should be a place where competing ideas can be expressed, debated, and tested. And one of this institution's signature contributions is defending that belief through policies like the Calvin Report, the Stones Report, the Strauss Report, the Picker Report, the Case Report. You get the point. A lot of reports have been written by law professors, many on this stage, saying that you shouldn't spend your time forcing other people to cancel the people that you disagree with. Which means that while you've been here, it's been easy to expose yourself to people and to ideas that challenge you. But after you leave, it'll be much easier to surround yourselves with people who already share your views. And the legal profession is worse off when that happens. Lawyers must persuade people who disagree with them, judges must consider arguments they might not initially find persuasive, and citizens in a democratic society must learn to coexist with people whose views differ from their own. So I hope that the last meaningful conversation that you have about the law with someone that sees the world differently than you is not one that occurred in your final quarter here. Instead, I hope that you'll continually seek out conversations with smart, thoughtful people who you're disposed to disagree with throughout the rest of your lives and your legal careers. Finally, pay it forward. This law school is now 123 years old. And one reason that it is endured is that each generation has invested in the next. Every year, alumni return to teach classes, judge moot court competitions, mentor students, participate in lunch talks, and share the lessons that they've learned. They don't do it for the free pizza or the joys of flying to Chicago in February. They do it because someone else once did it for them. Today, you'll cease being students and you'll become alumni. And with that transition comes an opportunity, and I would suggest a responsibility to help those that follow you. Start mentoring now the people that are applying to law school. Give advice to the students trying to navigate that law school. And return to campus. Make time for students who you once were. Now, universities are our society's greatest intergenerational project. They allow knowledge, wisdom, and opportunity to pass from one generation to the next. But their success depends on people who are willing to contribute not only to their own advancement, but also to the advancement of others who come after them. Be one of the people who helps ensure that that intergenerational project can endure. Class of 2026, today we celebrate everything that you have accomplished. We celebrate the hard work that brought you here, the people that helped you along the way, and the bright futures that lie ahead. Congratulations on this remarkable achievement. We're all proud of you, and we're grateful for the time that you spent with us, and we can't wait for you to go into the world and make us all proud. Congratulations to the class of 2026. Each year, we ask a member of our alumni community to speak at our hooding ceremony because their life in the law illuminates something that we hope our graduates will carry with them from this place. By that measure, it's hard to imagine a more fitting speaker than Judge David Tatel, a member of the class of 1966. Judge Tatel grew up in Silver Springs, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C., in a household where curiosity mattered. He relished science fairs and building a working Wilson cloud chamber, which allowed him to see the misty trails of ions, atomic particles otherwise invisible to the naked eye. That image is almost too apt, a young person learning to see the forces that shape the world, including the ones that others miss. David also had other interests. Baseball produced, for instance, what he recalled as the longest time that he was grounded after he skipped 10th grade to watch the 1956 World Series. He told his mother it was worth it because he saw Don Larson pitch a perfect game. After that, she added a second week to his punishment. Now, Judge Tatel attended the University of Michigan intending to study engineering, but after transformative internships in Washington, D.C. in 1962 and 63, he changed course and finished in political science. Soon after, he came here, the University of Chicago Law School. What followed was a career of unusual coherence. Before he became a judge, David Tatel built institutions that made the law available to people who otherwise might never have had meaningful access to it. He was the founding director of the Chicago's Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law. He later led the National Lawyers Committee, and he played an instrumental role in creating the Legal Services Corporation. He also led the Office for Civil Rights in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And at Hogan and Hartson, now Hogan and Lovells, he built an education law practice and became a national leader in pro bono service. In 1994, President Clinton appointed Judge Tatel to the D.C. Circuit, to the seat previously held by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Judge Tatel served there for nearly 3 decades with rigor, humility, careful reasoning, and at the end of those 30 years at the court, Judge Tatel said that he'd hoped to be remembered as a good judge, one that happens to be blind. In his recent memoir, Vision, Judge Tatel writes candidly about blindness, judging family, and the discipline of listening. He also writes with deep affection about his dog Vixen, his guide dog, who's here with us on the chancel today, wearing an adorable hat and a sign saying, "Don't pet me," that is trying my willpower. She also ended up on the cover of his recent book. Now, at this law school, we speak often about the life of the mind, rigorous inquiry, and preparing graduates to think clearly across institutions and fields. Judge Tatel's career reminds us that those habits are tools for service and making visible the claims of people that the legal system far too often fails to see. Please join me in welcoming one of the most impressive graduates in the history of this institution, Judge David Tatel.
Members of the class of 2026, families, faculty, and friends. Thank you, Dean Chilton, for that lovely introduction and for the honor of speaking at your very first commencement as Dean. And thank you, Professor Strahilovich, for sending such impressive law clerks my way. To the class of 2026, I well remember when I proudly sat in the pews where you sit today. With me was my wife, Edie. We'd been married just 10 months, and it felt like we had our whole lives ahead of us, and we really did. Edie, dear, would you please stand up? Edie and I have now been married for more than 60 years. 60 quite wonderful years. We have 4 children, 8 grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild, and a guide dog named Vixen. Through it all, we somehow managed to build, maintain, and sometimes rebuild meaningful careers. I attribute much of my professional success and satisfaction to the superb education I received at this fine law school. I learned from the very best teachers: Walter Blum, Harry Calvin, Sonia Menchikoff, Norval Morris, David Curry, and many more. You may not know those names, but you walk right past their portraits every day on your way to class. These fine teachers taught me to think like a lawyer, to write like a lawyer, to love the law. And the teaching didn't stop on graduation day. Decades after I left the Midway, another of my favorite teachers, Bernie Meltzer, kept grading my papers. He sent me letters, and I mean actual letters through the mail, commenting on opinions I wrote as a judge. Twice, Professor Meltzer even insisted that his former student had gotten it wrong. Of course, a lot has changed around here in 60 years. We didn't have computers, much less AI. There were only 5 women in my entire class, and the place was virtually all white. Hyde Park was dreary, with little to do. Worried that we weren't having enough fun, the dean of students talked our property professor, Allison Dunham, into letting us have parties at the house he owned at 60th and Kimbark and rent it out to a bunch of law students. The parties were a real blast, especially because the dean supplied not only a keg, but also a band called, and I kid you not, Mogan David and the Grapes of Wrath. It's still available on YouTube. I'm gratified to know, however, that some things have not changed. Your gifted and devoted professors taught you the same core skills and ideals that mine did. Thanks to them, and of course to your own hard work, you now have the tools to become superb lawyers. Whether you practice or teach, whether you work in government or the private sector, you have everything it takes to lead successful careers in the law. The challenge you now face, just as I did way back then, is how to have not just a successful career, but a meaningful one as well. Every generation before you has faced the same challenge, some finding more success than others. Thomas Jefferson gave us just the guidance we need. In a 1792 letter to Britain's first envoy to the United States, Jefferson wrote, "A nation as a society forms a moral person, and every member of it is personally responsible for his society." In other words, the way to live a meaningful life, a life of consequence, is to take personal responsibility for your society and everyone living in it. Lawyers can fulfill that responsibility in many ways. We can serve clients, teach students, work for government, help organizations thrive, or even create new ones. And in each of those roles, we can serve valuable causes bigger than ourselves. I found my cause in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. I was deeply moved by the courageous Americans who sat in at lunch counters, braved freedom rides, and stood up to segregationists like Public Safety Commissioner Bull Connor in Birmingham and Sheriff Jim Clark in Selma. At the Lincoln Memorial, I heard Martin Luther King declare that he had a dream. I admired the devoted lawyers, both in the Justice Department and in private practice, who traveled south to bring the civil rights struggle from the streets into the courts. And I was profoundly inspired by the many courageous federal judges who rose above their segregated roots and, even at great risk to themselves and their families, honored their oaths to enforce the Constitution's guarantee of equality under law. Two powerful statutes, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, both enacted while I was studying here at Chicago, have shaped and lent meaning to my entire career. Now, the next few sentences were not in my prepared text, because I added them after the Supreme Court's Tuesday night decision in Allen against Milligan. The 1965 Voting Rights Act was our nation's most effective civil rights law. It was the Voting Rights Act that completed the work of ending Jim Crow. It was the Voting Rights Act that brought millions of black voters into the democratic process and gave them a voice. In Allen, however, the Supreme Court completed the work it began in Shelby County against Holder and continued through Louisiana against Calais, contrary to the 15th Amendment and its own precedent. The court has now rendered that great statute virtually unenforceable. As a result, Alabama will hold its next election under a map that the district court found was expressly drawn to discriminate against black voters. But this is not the occasion to mourn the demise of the Voting Rights Act. There will be time for that. Today, we're here to celebrate the class of 2026. So I return to my prepared text. Now, the law offers you many fulfilling paths. You may become an associate or partner in a law firm, a prosecutor or public defender, a professor, politician, or even a judge. I'd like to tell you how 3 of our fellow U of C graduates turned traditional paths in the law into deeply consequential ones. Start with Alexander Polikoff, class of 1953. Polikoff began his career in a major Chicago law firm where he specialized in securities law. He loved that work, and he was great at it. Yet he devoted decades of his career to a single mission. It was Alex Polikoff, the securities lawyer, who launched the famous Gautreaux litigation, a case that shattered Chicago's long-standing practice of concentrating nearly all public housing in black neighborhoods. Gautreaux produced real, measurable change. Housing built throughout the region, thousands of families relocating to safer neighborhoods, and impressive gains in employment, education, and quality of life. I first met Alex when I was a very young associate at Sidley. One day, a partner asked me to prepare an amicus brief in a school desegregation case for a firm client, the Chicago Urban League. Polikoff represented the plaintiffs, families fighting to desegregate their schools. His office shelves were crammed with volumes on securities law. But there he was, a partner in a major law firm, working pro bono on one of America's most important civil rights issues. Wow, I thought, that's the kind of lawyer I want to be when I grow up. Michael McConnell, class of 1979, took a different task. After clerking for both Judge Skelly Wright on my court and Justice William Brennan, and teaching here at Chicago, McConnell served with distinction on the 10th Circuit. Then he did something perhaps unexpected. He gave up his lifetime appointment on the court to lead Stanford's Constitutional Law Center, revealing that his first commitment has always been scholarship. Scholarship whose impact extends well beyond the halls of academia. McConnell's book, The President Who Would Not Be King, has permeated the national debate over the separation of powers. His widely cited articles on the establishment and free exercise clauses have contributed to a modern understanding of the First Amendment that takes seriously the founders' twin ideals of prohibiting government establishment of religion while robustly protecting its free exercise. Then came Kelsey Brown Corcoran, class of 2005. Kelsey was one of my law clerks, going on to clerk for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She served on the Justice Department's Civil Appellate staff, chaired a major law firm's Supreme Court practice, and is now a public interest litigator at Georgetown's Institute for Constitutional Advocacy. Kelsey's life mission is to defend the Constitution and the rule of law. She has argued Supreme Court cases concerning birthright citizenship, homelessness, and asylum. She has helped defeat Supreme Court review in cases seeking to narrow protections for prisoners, workers, and immigration detainees. These are not abstract doctrinal issues. Every case involves real Davids up against real Goliaths. My constitutional law professor, Phil Kurland, taught me that the role of the courts, and therefore of lawyers, is to protect the individual against the leviathan of government, and to protect minorities against oppression by majorities. That is exactly what Kelsey Corcoran does every day. Now, imagine these three lawyers sitting right where you sit today. Although they excelled at very different callings, they all have one very important thing in common. They all deployed the formidable skills they learned here at Chicago in our nation's now 250-year effort to give meaning to one of the most important sentences in American, indeed human history, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That is what they were doing. And you can do that too. As you begin your lives in the law, pay attention to the world around you. Never lose sight of the many challenges our nation still faces. Embrace the defects in our less than perfect union as opportunities to make our world a better place. Attach yourselves to institutions whose missions you care about, and find mentors and role models like Alex Polikoff, Michael McConnell, and Kelsey Corcoran. They will inspire you and help you in ways you can't possibly anticipate. Then, do it for the next generation. Your first opportunity to mentor younger lawyers will come sooner than you think. So, pay it forward. Pay it forward as much and as often as you can. And always, always remember Thomas Jefferson's admonition that we are all personally responsible for the society in which we live. Fortunately, we lawyers, and that now includes each of you, have a toolkit uniquely honed for precisely that responsibility. Use it well. Congratulations. Thank you.
Judge Tatel was just here a few weeks ago for his 60th reunion, and so I hope you all follow his example and show back up in 2086. It's going to be a great time. Now, I'm thrilled to welcome our 2026 faculty speaker, Professor Leor Strahilovitz. Professor Strahilovitz is the Sidley Austin Professor of Law, and Professor Strahilovitz embodies all that we aspire for in a faculty member of the University of Chicago. He's, of course, has glittering academic credentials. Professor Strahilovitz is also a brilliant scholar. His scholarly interests include property and land use, privacy, intellectual property, technology, and contracts. His research is creative, insightful, and pushes the boundary of our knowledge. He combines deep doctrinal knowledge with insights from multiple disciplines, including economics and psychology. He's a pioneer in using methods from social psychology to probe and understand what people know and believe about the law and why they believe that. Professor Strahilovitz is also a beloved teacher. He regularly teaches property law, privacy, and our marquee University of Chicago Law School offering, Elements of the Law. In the process, he's won our teaching award multiple times. But I think what's most noteworthy about Professor Strahilovitz is that even among a faculty dedicated to helping students, he stands out as perhaps the most dedicated mentor, not just at this law school, but perhaps in legal education. Professor Strahilovitz has spent years involved in running our clerkship committee, helping a generation of our students be placed in judicial clerkships. He's also served as the director of the David M. Rubenstein Scholarship Program since its inception. And in that role, he's helped directly mentor roughly 20 students a year, every year, for more than a decade. For his scholarship, for his teaching, and for his service, I'm thrilled to welcome Professor Leor Strahilovitz.
Thank you so much, Adam. What an honor it is to follow Judge David Tatel. David is a mensch whose name will loom large when historians teach future generations about the history of American civil rights law, education law, administrative law, voting rights law, and constitutional law. Families, if you happen to be on the lookout for a gift to provide to any newly graduated lawyers you might know, I do recommend Judge Tatel's terrific autobiography, Vision, a memoir of blindness and justice, which Dean Chilton mentioned in his introduction. Thank you, David, for your love of the law school, your wisdom, integrity, and vision. Now, I promise we didn't coordinate thematically in advance, but like David, I want to tell you a story, 4 stories in fact, about graduates, students who came through the law school before all of you did. He chose to tell you about 4 students, Alex, Michael, Kelsey, and David Tatel. I had the pleasure of teaching Kelsey, though the other 3 distinguished alumni of the law school that he mentioned came through a bit before my time. So I'll likewise tell you about 4 other students I have taught, starting with Andre. I helped convince Andre to matriculate at the University of Chicago and taught him in a couple of classes. One day, Andre came into my office and told me he had learned that the very first Black federal district court judge in the United States was a graduate of this law school. And yet, there was nothing at the law school that commemorated this trailblazing alumnus. Over the next few months, Andre developed an audacious plan to celebrate the late Judge James Parsons' legacy with a banquet dinner honoring a prominent African-American jurist. He led a team of Balsa classmates who raised the money, invited a prominent judge, and secured the enthusiastic participation of the late Judge Parsons' descendants, faculty, and alumni. I was there at the first Parsons Legacy Dinner and many that followed. Numerous students in this chapel attended the 7th, 8th, and 9th Parsons dinners. It's hard to get anyone excited about a February event in Chicago, but during the annual Parsons Legacy Dinner, Hyde Park just might be the warmest place on earth. There's an important coda to this story. In recent years, several of our other student organizations have seen the success of the Parsons Legacy Dinner and decided that they'd like to come together to celebrate a prominent member of their own communities. So in the past few years, we're grateful that students in this chapel have helped launch LALSA's Elisa Fernandez banquet, APALSA's Patsy Takamoto Mink banquet, and Jilsa's annual Shabbat dinner and Abner Mikveh Distinguished Service Award. I was delighted to attend each of those events this year and to see so many of you there. It was lovely to see Muslim students at the Shabbat dinner and Latino students at the Mink dinner and white students at the Parsons dinner. These events were simultaneously inclusive and affirming. Yet we probably wouldn't have any of these festivities were it not for one student who was floored by the thoughtless oversight and put in the work to build an institution that has not only endured, but it has multiplied. Chicago's Rubenstein Scholarship Program is even older than the Parsons Legacy Dinner. And for the past 16 years, Ann Perry and I have had the privilege of running it, as Dean Chilton just mentioned. That is a long time, so I've requested to step down as the program's director next month. As my swan song, I'd like to tell a story about Lisa, a very promising college senior who was admitted at law schools that some people regard as fancier than ours. She chose Chicago in large part because the full tuition Rubenstein Scholarship Program came with a $20,000 annual stipend. And that extra money was going to be a difference maker, not for Lisa, but for her father. Lisa's dad became a farm worker starting at age 12 and had bounced around the fringes of the labor market, working at a Lowe's store today or a Verizon store tomorrow. Lisa used the stipend to help keep her dad financially afloat while she was in law school. Lisa's parents are divorced, and her father wasn't always there for her during her childhood. But family is family. In the years since matriculating, Lisa has gone on to become a wildly successful attorney. She was also ahead of her time. For so many years, your parents and older relatives took care of you and protected you. Then, a time will come when that person who took care of your needs you to be their guardian angel. By bathing them, or making decisions for them, or supporting them financially. For Lisa, that transition came in her 20s. For me, it came when I turned 50 and held my father's hand and forgave him and watched him drift away. And the day when parents in the audience will really need a hand from the energetic folks wearing black robes and maroon robes today will arrive sooner than any of us would prefer. Parents, asking your children for help will be one of the most disorienting things you will ever have to do. But as someone who's seen their determination and spirit up close, I can't imagine these kids are going to let you down. And in the meantime, let us appreciate that for most parents, days like today are part of a precious golden window. You're independent and your child is self-sufficient. Speaking of precious, I had the pleasure of teaching Jay as a first-year law student. Jay was a Kirkland and Ellis scholar, was a member of the Law Review, and like 6 of you, he won the Beale Prize as the best writer in his Bigelow legal writing section. Jay had a remarkably quick sense of humor. Now, with Andre and Lisa, I've received their permission to talk about them today, and I've gladly changed one of their names at their request. But I haven't emailed Jay to ask his permission. You see, by the end of his first year at law school, Jay wasn't feeling like himself. After a medical workup, Jay had to wrap his head around the worst possible news delivered by his oncologists. Jay had an incurable form of cancer and mere months to live. As the shocking news of Jay's illness raced through the law school, everyone who knew Jay had the immediate impulse to help. What could we do to support someone who had touched so many lives in such a short amount of time. When our Dean of Students posed that question to Jay, he had one answer. He said, organize a day of service with charitable organizations in Hyde Park and Woodlawn. He said, if you want to help me with my diagnosis, help others in need. 100 members of our community hastily answered Jay's call. If you were in Jay's shoes, you're 25, with no hope of a cure, how would you spend your remaining days on Earth? If you'd wanted to go to Paris or Machu Picchu or attend a Super Bowl, everyone at the law school gladly would have pitched in to make that wish a reality. But I've always been profoundly moved by the choices that Jay made. Jay decided to spend his final days on Earth as a 2L. He went to class, he outlined, he studied for his tests. He even did his law review site checks, conscientiously, I'm told. Whenever anyone asked Jay why he was still studying or attending every class that he could make it to, Jay gave the same answer. Because he enjoyed learning the law. And he absolutely adored being a law student with his friends. Jay taught us that the learning you've done, the work you put in, it isn't just a means to an end. There's an intrinsic value to it and special meaning in doing that hard thinking alongside the people sitting near you who so recently were strangers and who now have become your close friends. It's 2026, and so I feel compelled to share Hannah's story. Hannah came to the law school as a passionate defender of voting rights. She spent 3 years here learning everything she possibly could about election law. And then, after graduating, she landed her dream job, a DOJ honors position in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice in the voting rights section. Then, soon after she started at DOJ, a presidential election produced an outcome she wasn't expecting. She called me up to ask for advice. And two things stood out as she contemplated the possibility that she might have to quit this job she had worked so hard to get. First, she just couldn't stomach the cases she'd be asked to work on. And second, she'd spend the first 4 years of her career as a government lawyer not learning the skills she hoped to develop. So she resigned and took a private sector job. 4 years later, a new election produced a new president, and Hannah was able to serve in vital leadership roles in the next administration. Not in the area of voting rights, but in other policy domains that affect the lives of millions of people. It was a joy. She and I even got to work together on very important legislation during her time in the White House. Now, while being true to herself, Hannah managed the kind of career pivot that so many of you will have to make when circumstances outside your control upend your meticulous planning. Hannah underscores that public service is not a now or never proposition. Listen, as someone who has tried and failed to purchase stamps at the Hyde Park post office, I understand that incompetent or even misanthropic government workers do exist. But in the past year, the US Department of Justice and Health and Human Services and the National Science Foundation have lost so many Hannahs. Irreplaceable expertise, dedication, and experience have walked out the door. As I see it, this mass departure is not a purging of the deep state. It's an exodus of talent that is bemoaned by some of the most talented and capable and dedicated alumni I've known in my 24 years on the faculty, be they liberal or conservative or apolitical. The people resigning are overwhelmingly folks who made the government work better and upheld the rule of law. We are losing people who woke up every morning eager to put the heads of drug cartels and sex traffickers behind bars. Lawyers and doctors and scientists with critical portfolios are quitting their civil service jobs rather than continuing their association with a government whose agents shot and killed an ICU nurse and a poet in Minneapolis. People whose dream it was to be lifelong career civil servants at the Justice Department are resigning because of prosecutions, pretextual prosecutions, of the president's political critics. Now, I have to hope that, like Hannah, some of these liberal and conservative and apolitical people will have second acts as public servants. And I pray that they'll be joined by capable, civic-minded lawyers who are sitting under this soaring ceiling today. If we are fortunate enough to see those things happen, then the rest of us will have to be patient with them, recognizing that rebuilding institutions takes so much longer than tearing them down. In conclusion, I want to talk briefly about what's going to happen in a few minutes, as one by one, you and your classmates will be transformed from students into alumni. If today marks the end of your association with the law school, I wish you well. But whether you are a JD student, an MLS student, a JSD student, or an LLM, I do hope you'll show up here in 5 years and 10 years and 15. At your reunions, it will be good for your soul to catch up with your classmates, some of whom you'll have lost touch with once work and family life got so hectic. Over cocktails, you should reminisce about this difficult but still magical time in your lives. But I hope you'll also take the time to introduce yourselves to the alumni in the classes ahead of yours and those behind yours too. By that point in your lives, you will no longer be awkwardly trying to network your way into a job. You'll just be engaging in friendly and curious behavior. You know, like normal people do. I've taught more than 3,600 UChicago students, and I've only told you about 4 of them. And I've purposefully omitted stories about the students sitting in front of me today. Though, as the entire audience knows, there are epic tales about how each of them got here. So please cut me some slack on this. If I delivered the unabridged version of this speech, you would all be proud graduates of the class of 2027 by the time I finished my remarks. So instead, you'll have to share the vivid stories about your own lives that regrettably landed on my cutting room floor, plus the much juicier stories that the professors aren't privy to. At your reunions, starting in 2031. And while it's tragic that none of you will ever get to meet Jay, reunions are your best shot at meeting Andre, Lisa, Hannah, and so many other inspiring graduates of this law school who have heard the majestic blast of Rockefeller Chapel's organ and stared up at the gorgeous stained glass ceiling, wondering when the faculty speaker will finally stop talking so the hooding of graduates can commence. You needn't wonder any longer. To our students and family, to our students' families and loved ones, thank you so much for being here with us for this celebration and for supporting our amazing graduates. And to the class of 2026, congratulations!
Thank you, Judge Tatel and Professor Strahilovitz. Please join me one more time in thanking them for their remarks. Now, we'll proceed with the distribution of degrees and the hooding of our graduates.
Dean Chilton, as the Senior Director of Graduate Programs, it is my honor to present these students who have completed the program of studies prescribed by the faculty of the law school. They have been awarded the degree of Master of Laws by the Board of Trustees.
I congratulate these graduates on a successful completion of the program of advanced study in the law school, accumulating in the degree of Masters of Law.
Will the graduates please come forward to receive your diploma and then your academic hood as I call your name. Reem Al-Khani. Carlos Andrés Álvarez Quesada. Ayung Ayungnitias. Philip Bauer. Margarita Bessie. Satyajit Bose. Bernardino Raka Aji Brata. Philip Malte Broiling. Mateus Sosa Castro. Chi Huan Chun. Shi Chun. Francisco Contreras Peña. Diego Marcelo Contreras Salim Jana. Marvi Data. Ignacio Díaz de la Cruz. Angira Dorjinova. Tal El Maquis. Bernardo Flecha de Lima Cuña Pereira. Masaki Fujiwara. Naoki Fukumoto. Pablo Gallastegui. María Luisa de Miranda Geraldi. Kevin Paul Gibson Araftoa. João Vitor Gonçalves Cogiola Falcao. Yanis Hamama. Suje Jain. Yasmin Karam Tumaino. Florencia María Katzenstein Odone. Yuki Kawai. Mark N. Coopers. Sebastian Gerard Lehmann. Se Yu Lei. Yu Chi Liu. Eyal Joseph Mann. Antonia Martinovich. Ana Paula Maya Abreu Massa. Natalia Monroy. José Miguel Montes. Paula Moraes Borges de Sousa. Mónica Muñoz Castillo. Andreas Philip Müller. Motoki Nagata. Armando Neávez Garza. Evangelia Nicolaidu. Kei Ogawa. Álvaro Elías Portillo Prono. Nova Dahani Putri. Victoria Ribeiro Schnorr. Jerónimo Rico Iruretagoyena. Sofía Rivas Villalobos. Noah Roner. Francisco Abel Ruiz León. Casidis San Juan Tracul. Anna K. Schlindwein. Paul Hendrik Schnitzler. Joshua Dan Shepard. Aviv Zeev Shimshi. Jonas Silman. Jesus Silva Herzog Raya. Agnes Galu Sekerlangit Boru Simamora. Alfredo Alberto Taboada Galofre. Adela Tanuwijaya. Francisco José Torm Metz. Mario Javier Vázquez Zacarías. Chuan Chun Wang. Nanako Watanabe. Jiahe Harper Wei. Lola Charlotte Witt. Long To Wang. Tomoha Yamaoka. Hyungyun Yoon. Kai Yoshida. Lei Zhang. Le Tian Zhang. Congratulations to the LLM class of 2026. Dean Chilton, it is my honor to present the student who has completed the program of studies prescribed by the faculty of the law school. This student has been awarded the degree of Master of Legal Studies by the Board of Trustees.
I congratulate the graduate on the successful completion of a program of study in the law school, culminating in the degree of the Masters of Legal Studies.
Will the graduate please come forward to receive your diploma and then your academic hood as I call your name? Julia Rubin. Congratulations to the MLS class of 2026.
Dean Chilton, it is my honor as the Dean of Students to present these students who have fulfilled all of the requirements prescribed by the faculty of the law school to qualify them for the profession of law. They have been awarded the degree Doctor of Law by the Board of Trustees.
I congratulate these graduates on the successful completion of a program of study in the law school, culminating in a degree of Doctor of Law.
Will the graduates please come forward to receive your diploma and then your academic hood as I call your name? Daniel O. Abraham. Maya Susan Adele. Maya is being hooded by her brother, Omar Adele. There we go. Paul Adebayo Agbaje. Parsa Agel. Abed Al-Majid Asoleiman. Nicholas L. Amador. Caleb Amara. Timothy S. On. Harmela Antenna. Marjorie Maria Antahi. Charlotte Jean Berry. Kiana Momeni Banisad. Nicholas Bryce Bayer. Abby Berman. Abby is being hooded by her father, Steve Berman. Jesse Hannon Burns Zeev. Lee Andrew Bessner. Andrew Michael Biondo. Avery Michelle Bolden. Benedict Adler Bolton. Lillian Amelia Bourne. Clarissa Emily Boyd. Gloria L. Bueno. Alana Marie Carter. Carlos M. Cedillo Silva. Luke Michael Tchaikovsky. Helen Chamberlain. Anna Karina Chavez. Connie Chen. Jacob Thomas Klujinski. Megan Elizabeth Sistuli. Peter Kennel Clerger. Jackson Fuller Cole. Sarah Caroline Cole. Miranda Romaine Coombe. John A. Cooper. Bridget Boisier Curtis. Leah Jade Cusson. Summer Lee Jean Dai. Lucas Earl Danforth. Yinglung Da. Eugene Jerome DeCosse. Jarrett Andrew Delozier. Maya Lakshmi Adesh Desai. Erica Marie Doan. Robert Douglas Dorman. Ignazi V. Dorka. Connor Dorn. Matthew C. Dum. Aubrey K. Dykeman. Darian Edvilson. Darian is being hooded by his father, Ian Edvilson. Daniel Solomon Igozi. Daniel is being hooded by his brother, Joseph Igozi. Ahmed El Samak. George Stefan Erickson. Michelle Lee Esposito. Daniel J. Evans. Sarah E. Evans. Zoe Lewis Ewing. Benjamin Joseph Izana. Martina Sandoval Faber. Jacob R. Faust. Joshua Elliott Feldman. Hannah Pack Ferrero. Rachel Elaine Feingold. Samantha Ray Friedlander. Adriel Andrew Gadushi. Marina Sarah Gibbs Logue. Kobe Goldberg. Katrina T. Goto. Daniel Alejandro Graves. Elijah T. Grice. Alex Graven. Alec Graven. Benjamin Griswold. Taylor L. Guthrie. Christina Maria Hartman. Alexis Maria Harwick. Luke Anthony Henkel. Harrison Lee Hurd. Grace Hamilton Herring. Chase Mitchell Hyatt. Jacqueline Ann Hillman. Lauren Grace Hinton. Charles Holmes. Felicia Howe. Sabrina Sina Huang. Alec Hubbard. Casey John Huggins. Evan Grace Hughes. Adam Mark Hunter. Kai S. Yeager. Ryan Ryung Jane Liu. Kaylin C. John. Ajit Hayden Singh Johal. Brian Michael Jones. Sydney Jones. Jacob Glenn Judd. Daniel Jung. Lucy Nuri Jung. Francisca Kabuki Kabu. Nabil Motion Kapasi. Caroline Elizabeth Kassir. Caitlin N. Kelly. Benjamin Honor Kerr. Brendan Michael Kiernan. Alexandria S. Kim. Roland Kim. Graham Scott Kingwill. Rania Leone Kleinholtz. Kyle Douglas Knudsen. Marta Crayson. Mohammed Khalifa Creedon. Kevin M. Kwong. Kai Lancaster. Tamar Landman. Milo A. Last UN. Leon Harrison Leeds. Katriana M. Lineback. Jacob M. Lemler. Jacob S. Levin. Caroline Calloway Lewis. Ilana Gabrielle Lewis. Chloe Isabella Lee. Olivia Cipriana Libonati. Julia Jean Bernadette Lighton. Cassidy Elizabeth Mahoney. Grace Stewart Masback. Patrick Connor McGlinchey. Manuel Menendez Pidal. Andrew Edward Meyer. Bridget Lynn Meyer. Caroline Perry Miller. Colin K. Mitchell. Alexander Jacob Moreno. Brielle Elizabeth Mullally. Brian William Murphy. Mariam Walid Fuad Ismail Nadi. Mary Claire Nisus. New. Gi Young Faith No. G Young. Danielle Marie O'Connell. Connor Patrick O'Keefe. Senem Warlali Ayewo Opata. Caitlin O'Leary. Haley Ruth Altoff. Kyle George O'Malley. Joseph Vaby Oten. Youngjae Pak. Brendan James Palmer. David Chihyun Park. Anjali Patel. Dhruv Trushar Patel. Anna E. Pohl. Yi Q. Mayel Genovese Cortetti. Thomas Mark Raffelli. Thomas Edward Rafter IV. Ryan Joshua Ramirez. Seher Kiran Randawa. Elka Rao. Ravindra Wayne Reddy. Beck Reeferson. Quinton John Ramoldi. Marina Longin Ryu. Sarah Elizabeth Robideau. Max Katz Rotenberg. Neil Prasad Roy. Sarah Jasmine Sadati. Margaret Jane Shack. Morgan Olivia Shack. Julia Paulus Schrader. Deasia L. Scott. Zahir Sheikh. Spencer Chianyu Shia. Lindsay Marie Schrodek. Sanai Tiwala Sachinga. Eddie Bawale Day Smith. Turner Francis Stanton. Hannah Rose State. Maria E. Stevenson. Daniela Michelle Stoltz. Brandon Philip Strauss. Simon Shinpu Siu. Jonathan Feng Tao. Lily Rose Tritt. Amanda Elizabeth McLeod Van Dyke. Varun Vijay. Joseph Kirby Voss. William Maxwell Waller. David Yang Wang. Weining Wong. Avery Grace Wasson. Kyle David Weber. Logan Tillman Welch. Samuel M. White. Jonah Blaine Willard. Julia Wu. Danielle Nicole York. Jessica C. Zelmer. Bonnie Zhao. Congratulations to the JD class of 2026.
Thank you all. This now concludes our hooding ceremony for 2026. Please remain in your seats, though, until the faculty party and all of the members of the class of 2026 recess from the chapel. And then please join us across the midway back at the law school for a reception. Now, I kindly ask, though, that you don't linger too long in front of the chapel after we recess back, because another unit is less lucky than us and has to go second in here. So please join me one last time in congratulating the class of 2026.